Hello. Your first step to work on while I'm conferencing with people is to make sure you finish both body paragraphs for your Odyssey essay. Again, you should have two events. One paragraph is one event. The other paragraph is the other event. Make sure you finish that first. That's first priority, most important at this point. Then you need to make sure you've read all of Book 21. This is pages 424 to 438, I believe. Yes, I was correct. So make sure you've actually read that book, because otherwise what I'm going to tell you isn't going to make any sense. And I'm going to walk you through some annotations here and some explanations and some things that you should think about as you read this book. So once you've read Book 21, continue this video. I wanted to bring up one thing that we skipped. We skipped Book 2, which is one of the Telemachus books. And in Book 2, we find something out about Penelope that's sort of important. And that's that for the first few years, she tricked the suitors. She came up with this plan to trick them. So I just wanted to show you that part. So it talks about, and this is in Book 2, her latest masterpiece of guile. So where Odysseus is usually described as using guile, using cunning, craftiness, trickery, so is Penelope. She set up a great loom in the royal halls and she began to weave. So like making fabric. The weaving fine spun, the yarn's endless, and she would lead the suitors on. And she would say, "Young men, my suitors, now that King Odysseus is no more, go slowly, keen as you are to marry me, until I finish off this web. So my weaving won't all fray and come to nothing." So she says she'll wait. She's going to wait to marry them till she finishes her weaving. She says, "This is a shroud for old Lord Laertes, Odysseus' father, for that day when the deadly fate that lays us out at last will take him down." So she says, "Oh, I have to weave this burial shroud, this blanket for Odysseus' father's body whenever he dies. You know, he was a king. He needs to be buried properly. He's alive now, but one day he'll die, and I need to make sure this is done by then." So the suitors believed her, and by day she'd weave the fabric, and then by night, by the light of torches set beside her, she would unravel all she'd done. So she would weave during the day, be like, "Oh, I'm still working on it," and then at night she would go in secretly and undo all of her work, and basically start over in the morning farther back. So then she'd weave all day up, still working on it, and then at night she would go undo it. And the suitors say 3 whole years she deceived us with this scheme. So out of the, 10 years after the Trojan War when Odysseus was supposed to be back, for 3 years she managed to hold the suitors off because of her own craftiness and her own plan. So it shows that she can rival Odysseus in terms of cunning and in terms of intelligence. She's not just beautiful. I know in Book 17 it describes her like Aphrodite, a golden Aphrodite. So she is beautiful, but she's also very smart. And if one of her servants hadn't tattled on her, basically, she could have just kept this ruse up. But obviously now, 10 years later, she can't keep the ruse up, which is why at the beginning of Book 21, XXI, there we go. Odysseus strings his bow. She has to deal with the suitors finally. So if you turn to page 424, which is the beginning of this book. So Penelope goes to get Odysseus' bow. This is at the bottom of 424. His back-strung bow with its quiver bristling arrows. So a bow and arrow, everybody knows what a bow and arrow looks like. If you don't, Google it. It's a weapon, obviously, and use it to shoot. And she goes to get Odysseus' bow. And obviously she has some sort of plan. The next couple pages, she's just talking about how Odysseus got his bow, which is unimportant, and why it's not with him. It talks about how he always left it at home because it was such a precious gift. Now, this is at the bottom of 425. 425. Now the lustrous queen, right? That's Penelope. She's the queen, and she's described as lustrous. Whoa, there's one of our vocab words. So similarly to Calypso being lustrous and glowing and beautiful, so is Penelope. And on the next page, 426, it talks about how she goes into the room where the bow is, she reaches it, takes it down, and then starts crying. So one thing to think about is, this is a weapon. Usually weapons are not very emotional, but think about why this would make her cry. So hard, anyway. So at the bottom of 426, we find out her plan with the bow. She goes in to talk to the suitors. She says, "Listen to me, my overbearing friends." Right, she's being sarcastic. "You who plague this palace night and day, drinking, eating us out of house and home. The only excuse you can offer is your zest to win me as your bride. So, to arms." Right? "Arm yourselves, my gallants, brave men. Here is the prize at issue, right before you." The prize would be Penelope. And then she says, "I set before you the great bow of King Odysseus now. The hand that can string this bow with greatest ease, that shoots an arrow clean through all 12 axes, he is the man I follow." So she has to give them some sort of chance. So her task is, here's my husband's bow. If you can string it easily and shoot an arrow through axes, through a line of axes in the ground. So you put the axe head in the ground, and it usually has like some kind of hole at the end of the handle. So if you line that up, you've got like a line of holes, tiny little like circles. And if you can get the arrow through all of those straight, which means you have to shoot it very straight, she will marry that person. And this is smart, because this is a difficult task. Number one, Odysseus was strong, so you'd have to be as strong as Odysseus to be able to string the bow. Number two, it requires skill. So you have to be as skilled as Odysseus to be able to shoot the arrow through the axis. So then the suitors complain, Antinous complains, about how it's not going to be easy. And then Telemachus sets up the axes. So on 428, this is Telemachus, 428, he planted the axes, digging a long trench one for all and trued them all to a line, so he lined up the axes, then tamped the earth, so like put the ground around them, buried them like you bury a plant, or plant a plant. He stood at the threshold poised to try the bow, right? He doesn't want to marry his mother, that's not why he's trying the bow, but he does want to see if he can do it. 3 times he made it shudder, so when you string the bow, you have to bend it so that you can put the string across. And it's usually made of wood, so he made it shake because he's bending it. If you try to bend a ruler, it's difficult. It's that kind of thing. So 3 times he made it shudder, 3 times his power flagged, so he couldn't do it. And now, struggling with all his might for the 4th time, he would have strung the bow, but Odysseus shook his head and stopped him short. So he could almost do it. He almost has the strength of his father, but Odysseus, who's still dressed as a beggar, gave him the no-go, said, don't do it. And then the prince says, "God help me, must I be a weakling? Oh, shoot. Couldn't do it, I guess, So, again, that's on 428. So, all the suitors try, and as they're doing this, So we have lots of things going on. We have Penelope watching. We have the suitors arguing about who's going to try the bow. And as they try, they fail, obviously. We have Odysseus, who is just hanging out in the corner as a beggar. On page 430, he slips out of the room with Eumaeus, the swineherd, and with a cowherd as well. So another loyal servant. And he asks them, how far would you go to fight beside Odysseus? Say he dropped just like that, snap, from a clear blue sky and a god brought him back. Would you fight for the suitors or your king? And they again think they're talking to the beggar. But they both say, let our master come. You know, it'd be so great. We'd fight with Odysseus. We'd fight against these suitors. So certain at least these two were loyal to the death, Odysseus reassured them quickly. I'm right here in the flesh myself. And he reveals himself. He says, we're going to fight the suitors. Now that I know that I can trust you, we'll fight them together. So this is, we think about what epic traits this is showing in terms of Odysseus, making sure that the people he's aligned with are going to be loyal to him. Unlike the crew who didn't listen to him at all, you know, now he's older, he's wiser, he knows that he needs to be more careful about the people around him. And he shows them a scar that he got as proof that it's him. So the plan at the bottom of this page, this is 431, is let's slip back inside, singly, not in a pack. I'll go first, you're next. Here's our signal. When all the rest in there, our lordly friends, are dead against my having the bow and quiver, good Eumaeus, carry the weapon down the hall and put it in my hands. So Odysseus needs to get the weapon somehow. So Eumaeus is going to take it to him. Then tell the serving women to lock the snugly fitted doors to their rooms. Right, so tell all the women to lock the doors, stay out of the hall. They don't want to get involved in this. So then we get to the part where it actually gets good. On 432, Antinous talks about nobody's going to get the bow, so we might as well just drink and relax. None of us is going to do it today, so we'll just, calm down. And then Odysseus, as the beggar, tries to get the bow. 433, King of Craft, Odysseus, said with all his cunning, he appeals to Eurymachus and you, brilliant Antinous, right? He's trying to talk them up and flatter them. For the moment, give me the polished bow now, won't you? So to amuse you all, I can try my hand, my strength. So he says as the beggar, wouldn't it be funny if I tried to string it? Just let me string it. And they get really angry at that for some reason. Modest words that sent them all into a hot, indignant rage. So think about, what is it that they're so afraid of to let this beggar try? Why don't they even want to give him a chance? That is something that you'll want to figure out. Okay, I need to pause the video because I'm going to run out of time, but I've got one little section left that we're going to look at. So this is part 1. Continue with part 2, please.